In 1884, a U.S. Marshal named Heck Thomas rode into the outlet territory with a list of 12 names. Within 6 weeks, 11 of those men were dead. Only one made it to trial, and he hanged 3 months later. Hollywood gave you marshals who upheld the law. History shows you something else. Men with federal badges who operated in a legal gray zone where wanted dead or alive wasn't just a poster, it was policy. The truth is this: U.S. Marshals in the Old West were not peacekeepers. They were federal manhunters paid per arrest, operating in territories where courts barely existed and survival depended on who shot first. They didn't wait for juries. They didn't read rights. And the government didn't ask questions as long as the body count matched the warrant list. This is the system America built to control the frontier. And what it created wasn't justice. It was something far more efficient, far more brutal, and completely legal. Between 1865 and 1896, the United States controlled over 2 million square miles of frontier territory with fewer than 200 federal marshals. That's roughly 10,000 square miles per man, an area larger than the state of Maryland, with no backup, no radio, no rules of engagement. These men weren't lawmen in the traditional sense, they were contractors. The U.S. Marshal Service paid by commission, fees per arrest, mileage reimbursement, and a flat rate for bringing in a fugitive. Dead or alive made no difference to the Treasury Department. In fact, dead was cheaper. No trial, no jail costs, no appeals. Hollywood showed you Wyatt Earp cleaning up Tombstone. What it didn't show you was that Earp wasn't a marshal during the OK Corral shootout. He was unemployed, bitter, and acting outside any legal authority. Real U.S. Marshals like Bass Reeves, Bill Tillman, and Chris Madsen operated in Indian Territory, where there were no sheriffs, no town councils, and no legal precedent. A marshal's word was the law. His gun was the court, and the federal government preferred it that way. Trials were expensive. Bullets were not. The mistake most fugitives made wasn't running. It was assuming a marshal would try to arrest them. In 1889, a horse thief named Jim July fled into the Creek Nation after killing a deputy in Arkansas. The federal warrant listed him as armed and dangerous. Deputy Marshal Padden Tolbert tracked him for 11 days through swamp country. When Tolbert finally found July's camp, he didn't call out. He didn't announce himself. He fired twice from cover. July died without knowing who killed him. Tolbert's report to Judge Isaac Parker in Fort Smith was 4 sentences long. No witness statements, no questions. The warrant was marked served, and Tolbert collected his fee. This was standard procedure. Marshals operated alone or in pairs deep in outlaw country, where announcing your presence meant dying first. The men they hunted knew it. The marshals knew it. And the courts looked the other way. Because frontier justice wasn't about fairness, it was about control. Men who hesitated didn't last. Marshals who gave warnings ended up in unmarked graves. The system didn't reward restraint. It rewarded results. And the cost of a mistake wasn't prison. It was a bullet you never saw coming. Here's what the history books won't tell you. Some of the most effective U.S. Marshals were former outlaws themselves. Bass Reeves, the most successful deputy marshal in the Indian Territory, had been a fugitive slave who escaped to live among native tribes during the Civil War. Bill Doolin's gang was infiltrated by lawmen who had once ridden with him. Heck Thomas learned tracking techniques from the same Comanche warriors who raided settlements. The federal government didn't care about a man's past. They cared whether he could bring in bodies. And then there's the part that makes modern Americans uncomfortable. Marshals had legal authority to deputize anyone, at any time, for any reason. That meant posses formed from whoever was available. Drifters, ex-convicts, bounty hunters. In Cherokee Territory, marshals deputized tribal police who had scores to settle. Justice had nothing to do with it. Judge Isaac Parker, known as the Hanging Judge, sent marshals into Indian Territory with one standing order: no empty saddles. Between 1875 and 1896, his court tried over 13,000 cases. He sentenced 160 men to death, but hundreds more never made it to his courtroom. They were shot during resisting arrest or attempting escape. The paperwork was always the same. The outcome never changed. This wasn't corruption. It was the system working exactly as designed. The frontier was chaos. Marshals were the federal government's answer, and the answer wasn't law. It was force. Between 1872 and 1900, over 100 U.S. Marshals and Deputy Marshals were killed in the line of duty. Most died alone. Many were never found. But the men they hunted fared worse. Mortality records from Indian Territory show that of fugitives wanted by federal warrant, fewer than 30% survived to stand trial. The rest were killed during pursuit, shot while resisting, or simply disappeared into mass graves with no names attached. For the marshals who survived, the psychological cost was severe. Bill Tilghman, one of the most famous lawmen of the era, retired in 1910 and became a prohibition officer. In 1924, at age 70, he was shot and killed by a drunk federal agent in Cromwell, Oklahoma. The man who'd hunted outlaws for 30 years died in a pointless barroom argument. Heck Thomas lived to 72, but his later years were marked by paranoia and isolation. He slept with a gun until the day he died, convinced someone from his past would come for him. Bass Reeves brought in over 3,000 fugitives during his 32-year career. 14 of those arrests were men he killed. In 1902, he arrested his own son for murder. Reeves served the warrant himself, tracked him for 3 weeks and brought him in alive. His son was convicted and sentenced to life. Reeves never spoke about it again. Living didn't mean winning. It meant surviving long enough to realize what you'd become. The U.S. Marshals Service still exists today. It still tracks fugitives. It still operates across state lines with federal authority. But the men who built that system did so in an era when a badge wasn't a symbol of justice. It was a hunting license. They weren't heroes. They were instruments of federal power in a land where power meant survival, and survival meant violence. Hollywood turned them into legends. History shows they were something else entirely. Men who carried out a brutal, efficient system that America needed but didn't want to acknowledge. The Old West wasn't tamed by courts, it was tamed by men who understood that the fastest way to end a trial was to make sure there was no defendant. That's not justice, but it worked. And for 30 years, it was the only law the frontier ever knew.